Okay, so we're here today to talk a bit about the process of being an agency that can incorporate creatives and developers and clients working together in somewhat an agile methodology. And the project in mind we're going to try to demonstrate this with is our somewhat latest project called Strafe. So first we're going to discuss a bit about the background in that project. We're going to then move into a bit about what it means to have an agency and what sort of pitfalls you might have working agile and stuff like that. And then we're going to move into a bit about the process and how exactly we executed this project in terms of methodology and setup. We're going to also discuss some outcomes of that, and then we're going to round things off with questions if there is any. So, background. What we actually created was this, Strafe. I don't know if there's a lot of gamers in here, but Strafe as a word is the word in first-person shooters when you move from side to side. That is called to strafe. So already the name of the app is telling that it's a bit geeky. What Strafe is that it's an esports companion app, meaning that it's a somewhat second screen app for watching and following esports. So if you imagine the app Forza Football for football, this would be the same sort of app, but for esports. So in the app, we're covering the 5 most competitive games as of now, being League of Legends, Dota 2, StarCraft 2, Hearthstone, and Counter-Strike Global Offensive. And within all those esports we have, or not we, but the Strafe guys, they have an editorial section that just posts results throughout the weeks and nights and days. So it's very, I think, tedious work, but it's all done manually. And it also, I think, provides an experience of esports being uncluttered. Because if you look at esports, visually, up until now, it looks a bit like this. It's a feeling of, what sports would look like in 2000 or 2001, maybe. So, esports has a history of being very, I think, ugly-ish. So we took this and transformed it into this. So it's more streamlined, less stuff, and just more focusing on esports.
And the results in the games.
And the results in the games, exactly. So Strafe Client and Magento Agency, together with us as a partner, I'm just going to go through exactly what we did in this project. We developed and designed native app for iOS and Android. We created a detailed release plan for the upcoming year. So we started a project with having a 1.0 release in mind, and then together with the client we developed a plan for the next coming year, what features we were supposed to implement. We also did a front-end development and design of their website. We built an API, so all the data that are being put into or being fetched by the app were built by Zaidin, I think, in particular.
For the record, it's using Django on Heroku, so we have an API that is fairly reliable, and we are using the Django as framework to the JSON, so it's something very, very modern.
Yeah, it's amazing. We also developed and designed a CMS, which is, I think, turned out to be not so easy, actually, building a CMS. And then we also, to some extent, helped them in developing a business plan, because as of now, everything is free and there's no ads anywhere. And at some point, this startup is going to need to actually, generate some revenue. And all of this was done somewhat agile. But before we look into that, we need to, I think it's important to discuss a bit about the pitfalls of being an agency and trying to be agile, because I think the methodology is probably better suited if you're building your own product and you don't have the involvement of other development roles and other creatives or creative directors, and you have a lot less people and a much more focused experience. So the first statement is, for an agency, Agile is very complicated, in my experience, because of several things. And I think the first thing being that it's a very development-focused process. Seeing like how we used to work when I started 3 years ago, I work as a product designer, if I didn't mention that in the beginning. We used to work a lot with handovers, so you would have the interaction designer sit and do all the interaction, and then that would be passed on to me, and I would draw some shapes and colors and whatever, and then I would hand it to a developer, and then they would develop it, and then that was it. So in terms of deliverables, it was a very efficient way of doing things, but it turned out that towards the end of the process, as a creative, you were sort of detached from the whole experience. So when a developer would have questions regarding functionality within the app that had been decided, 2 rows back in the line, none of us were very interested in, just because we were doing other projects basically, so we were somewhat detached. I think that it's being this development focused in its origin also makes it hard to involve the entire team in the process. And it also, I think, creates a sense of less ownership if you focus too much on development in it. And the second point being here, that we don't exactly know what it is. Personally, I am still trying to figure out what exactly Agile is. And if we don't know what it is, it's hard also to sell to clients what we don't know what it is. And being a client, then probably it makes it even harder to buy into something that is supposed to be a good thing, but we don't really know what it's going to do for us. And I think sometimes the third point could be that we spend too much time trying to be agile. I remember when we tried it out the first time, I remember sitting in a room with 3 developers and me playing planning poker. And I was trying to estimate how many hours certain development tasks would take. And obviously I had no business doing that whatsoever. So I think the main challenges for an agency, if you're going to do the agile bit and involve everyone, is how do you fit all the roles in the same process? How can we involve everyone the whole way? Meaning that the whole way needs to have a way for us to start and finish the project together. Because as soon as you're detached from the project, you start doing other things, and then that project becomes less interesting. And it also becomes unfair to the developer that's still stuck in the project trying to actually work, and then you have designers that are doing other things. And I think another one is how it's important to ensure ownership all the way, like the team owns the product together. Not that I think it's quite easy also in a waterfall method that you have like the interaction designer owning the whole user experience, and then you have the designer owning the whole, visual experience, and then they have the developer owning the code and the development, but they never really doing this in harmony. Process. So for Strafe, I think we actually managed to pull this off. In my 3 years, it's been the most enjoyable production project to work in, because we all were working together, and not because all of us that worked in the project also love esports. I think that's just added to the whole thing. But I think we did it in a way that actually helped us set a new benchmark for ourselves in the way we do things. So the team setup for this project was that we had user interface and user experience designer with me. So that's one role. Then we had another one. We had the user experience designer for the CMS part.
It's very important that the data and put it in the CMS was done the right way, especially because the team were looking at the match in real time and inputting the results in real time. So it was very important that the experience for the team and doing that was as good as the user using the app.
Yeah, and as the CMS also, I mean, it it's going to become their main source of income, seeing that they're going to input a lot of data using it. So it needs to be usable in a good sense. Then we had another user interface designer. We split responsibilities between both platforms, but then we, in the whole process, we sort of switched that up, and I will get to that later, why we did that. We had one iOS developer working full-time on iOS. We had one Android developer working full-time on Android. We have one tech lead, producer role that was the glue between everything and the client. And then we had API and backend, and that would be Zaidin over there. And the project was structured as such. So hold on. Yeah, we can't really see the gray parts here, but doesn't really matter, I think. So in this timeline, how do we involve all of the, the roles? Because usually what you would do is that you would have a phase in the beginning where you would decide how everything would look, and then, well, vacation is here just because we had vacation. And then you would leave it off here to developers, and then they would just develop, and then you would sort of quality assure around here maybe. But what we tried to do here is that we tried in this early phase, we involved our Android developer, for instance, because he was very interested in esports, and he actually helped us create the concept for the whole user experience in regards to providing key information of especially League of Legends and Dota 2, like what the users would want from that experience. Meaning that once he started to develop the product, he was already initiated in the importance and meaning of all the functionality.
One thing that is not shown is that the CMS started around late August.
Yeah.
We worked with the front-end developers and also with the UX designer just to model the architecture layer. So when we started the sprint one, the CMS was already here, and we had already some endpoints that the iOS and Android developer could use.
Yeah. And I think the other challenge is to actually make everyone start at the same time. So what we would want was that we were going to work together the whole way here. So, for instance, we decided the first couple of things for the first views in the concept phase with the design, because we couldn't just start exactly at the same time. That was virtually impossible. So we decided a couple of things here, and once development started, the developers would work on those views that we created here, and we would start working on the views that we were going to do in Sprint 2. So we would actually decide on the user experience and the design one sprint ahead. So we had some sort of a misaligned sprint. So the development sprint would be to develop features in a very linear order, while the design team would be one sprint ahead and decide everything. And the anatomy of a sprint would look like this. So you would start off the sprint on week 1 with a planning of the sprint with the client. So before that we had a backlog of features that we would sit together, the whole team, and then we would discuss what could fit within the sprint, what we intended to fit in the sprint, and what we had to take out, and what we wanted to add. And then you would design and develop all the way through to Friday, where we would have a sprint demo in the agency with crowd. Just to create a sense of ownership outside of the team. Like, we had 7 people working together at the same time within the team, but then we also wanted to actually, that sort of commitment to spill out over the agency. So the sprint demo would be very public. And then the last thing we did in a sprint was that on the Monday after the sprint was finished, we would have an evaluation part. So either after or before, depending on everyone's schedule, you would do the sprint planning with the client. But we would evaluate the whole sprint also. So we would do like somewhat of a retrospect to discuss how the sprint had progressed, what we wanted to do differently, and what we could improve upon. So the pros of having this setup with the misaligned sprint was that you get designers to stay attached to the project almost the whole way. You have API endpoints ready for developers in time, or we had, with the way we planned it. You can have... Oh, sorry.
So we are always ahead alpha sprint from the iOS and Android. And it creates also some kind of response. So if there is a need to change some API, it just implement it. So it's still very fresh and easy to modify.
So, and what you also have is that you have developers that can feedback on the design work that you've done, because they spent the last week developing, your previous design work. So they're pretty familiar with what works and what doesn't work. So it becomes even more accurate than what it, did before, where they actually encountered problems beforehand. I think it provides interesting stand-ups because everyone got to know everything at all times. Seeing that the tech lead would put in, what are we going to discuss with the client today, what decisions are going to be made. The developers would actually share the progress of the sprint development, and the designers would show upcoming features. So everybody was, being educated all the time. Everyone starts and finish at the same point. Basically, the only sprint we couldn't execute that was the last one, because there was nothing for us to plan to actually design. But we did actually do stuff in that sprint, and I will show you what later. And then if we look at the Monday meetings we had where we evaluated our work, stuff that could come up would be stuff we wanted to improve on. And a couple of examples would be that we went from a digital task board to an analog. I mean, it's not a big thing or anything, but it really helped us track the progress, because we would have this gathering point in the office instead of our digital Trello board where nobody really bothered to look. Unfortunately, I love Trello though; it's a great tool. But you could actually see a very tangible progress where post-its were being moved. Yes.
But didn't you do story pointing along while defining? That's the traditional way to do story pointing.
Yeah.
So you see your velocity is ongoing in the right direction.
Yeah, we can see that, but we couldn't really see when tasks were being done because we didn't really log in that much. And the second thing we did was that we went from user stories to view specific tasks, because it suited the dynamics of the group better. We instead of naming the boards to as a user blah 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 blah, we had main view, home view, tournament view, and then we would actually just do assignments on each. We also changed the way we specify design because internally, not in general, because we were 3 different designers and we all gave our very own specifications. We had our very own ways of doing things. Not always a good thing, but we actually aligned that together with the developers just to set a standard for the project at least. We also came up with less client contact with team members. When we started the project, we had the full transparency. We would have the client sit next to us and they could just walk around and talk to everyone in the team. We found that it would be not so great for them to talk to developers at all times. We love the client, but we figured out we isolated the contact with me and the tech lead, so we would take care of all the client contacts. We also decided that we should have a clearer approval process to speed up work, meaning that since we had this misaligned sprints, we needed tighter approval. So in the middle of the sprint, we wouldn't change everything. We had it sort of locked down for the upcoming sprint. The last sprint, where the design work ran out, we had a full 2 weeks of quality assurance. So what we did for the developers then was that all the designers would fill a backlog with prioritized tasks. So we would sit together. I think we had at one point 52 tasks that were prioritized from 1 to 52. And so that made us able, together with the developers, to communicate to the client exactly what tasks we expected to get done in what order and in what time. And as us designers, we would then, in this phase, we would let go of the design work and just constantly try and test the app and sort of optimize animations and discuss different ways to make it smoother. I think that was quite the luxurious thing to do, because otherwise they would take you out of the project and put you in another one just to ensure billability. But by using this process, we were so fast that we actually had time for doing that anyways.
Also a bit of QA each sprint, of course, but this one was really to improve the look and feel and ensure that both the Android and the iOS experience was the same.
Yeah. We would also spend some time planning for upcoming releases. We would do proactive client works, meaning that we would design views that weren't already in the app. So that's basically the whole process. And the outcome of this is a couple of things. One is some of the key learnings is that with more team ownership, we need less admin. So I know initially for the Strafe project, we had a project manager also on top of that. But seeing that we all owned our very own, took responsible for everything, and everybody knew everything, we really didn't have that need for a project manager in this. But maybe we could have had that in order to reduce the amount of client to developer direct contact, maybe. And it's also more fun being involved from start to finish. I mentioned it a couple of times, but I think it's very important that you stay attached to the project until it's actually finished, because it creates a sense of team ownership that I think is very important for every agency. And we can also fit the whole agency in Agile, more or less, or maybe not super Agile, but it's almost more lean, I guess. So that's and we were also faster than we expected, and I think having everyone involved the whole time really makes everyone know more about the product, and the more the team knows about the product, the better we become at taking decisions regarding the project.
Especially when it was very easy to react when some kind of issue arises. You can really, like, everyone take his place and say, okay, that's the way to solve that.
Yeah.
Solving issue was very, very fast on that project because everyone was there, and since we were all on the same table, on the same team table, it was really easy to solve issues.
Yeah. So when I was, I think, ill, we could make decisions without certain team members because we all knew the product. And then the technical overview.
So I was in charge of the API, but I'm also a iOS developer, and I'm not in charge of the project itself. The iOS app has really been designed around the lean view controller philosophy. It's better.
Yeah, and you get the kit. Yeah.
And the whole project was around the intention strategy from Chris Adolph. So we had intentions connected through interface builder. I don't know if you're aware around that. Is really trying to remove all the responsibilities from the view controller, apart from the fact of showing stuff. It's mostly Swift, the presentation and intention layer. We locked that project on Xcode on beta 6, I would say, something like that. No, it's of course up to the standard of Swift, but it's all the presentation and the intention layer is in Swift. We used a lot of new features like IB inspectable, the flow. We have a enhanced flow layout with extra properties like the parallax effect and stuff like that, and everything is can be configured in the interface builder. We are using immutable structs in the presentation layer. The architecture of the app is you have the whole network and model objects that is using Objective-C. We store everything in core data, and then we use NSFetch result and NSManage object. But the data that is shown in the control by the controller is coming from an extension of the different models as structs. So as I said, Objective-C for the networking, Mantle for the models, and we are using the command bus pattern inspired by Graham Lee. So we really try to have a very modern layout for the app. Oops, if you want to take a photo. Sorry, yeah.
Make them appear.
I think we
will take questions if you have any. Otherwise, you can mingle with us at 20 past.